dedicated, and it just shows your extent to your love for your children and the care that you have towards them. So as you know, today we're going to be discussing adolescenthood, the issues that come up with adolescence, how to make these years easier for them and as successful for them as well as for yourself. Feel free to, we are a small group, so, feel free to share, ask any questions. There should be small pieces of paper going around. If you have any questions, they can be brought up to me. So I wanted to first start out by giving you a few scenarios of, some situations that families may deal with, and they also might relate to you. Maybe you're a parent whose 14-year-old daughter is oblivious to the pile of toxic waste that she now calls her bedroom. Or maybe you have a 15-year-old son who can score 20 billion points on video games, but seems to forget how to use the controls on a vacuum. Maybe you can't understand why your 16-year-old daughter yells to you and says, "I hate you, you're the worst mom in the world," one minute, but another minute says, "Mom, can you please drive me to the mall so I can meet my friends?" Maybe you can't figure out why your children can volunteer for every single activity at school, spend all day with their friends, but is overwhelmed by the simple request of, washing the dishes. Maybe you can't understand why your teenager leaves the room every single time you enter the room. So a lot of times parents ask me, is whatever's going on with my teenager, is this normal? The good news is most of you today will probably see that the chances of the experiences your teenager is going through is normal. And the person sitting to the left of you or the person sitting to the right of you is probably going through very similar situations. And you'll be glad to know that, again, these are normal situations. No matter how intense your adolescent's behavior might be right now at this point, there are answers how to be a better parent. There are answers to how to bring your children up successfully. And that's the purpose of these meetings. We want to encourage you. We want to provide you with the tools that you can use that could be helpful in your household. But before we begin to discuss adolescence and the means to raising them and different kinds of tools and interventions that can help you, first we need to understand them. We need to understand their experiences, what they go through. So the first thing I want to discuss is, what is adolescence? This is actually my favorite group to deal with. I love working with adolescents. It is the hardest group to deal with, and I've actually been able to work at many different institutions that were specifically oriented to adolescents. So adolescence is basically a time of transition. I like to call it adults in training, because they're not children per se, but they're not yet adults. So during this time, your adolescent is going through a lot of different changes. And it's important that you know this, that you're aware of, what's going on with them. So they're going through different kind of changes, such as neurological changes, social changes, emotional changes, hormonal changes, and spiritual changes as well. And all these changes, what happens is it happens at the same time. So it gets very confusing, and it's a lot to manage. Like I said, teenagers are in transition. They're leaving behind their childhood and becoming adults. So just like studying to be a doctor, you must go through training. To be a teacher, to be a lawyer, any kind of occupation, you have to go through some kind of training. And for adolescents, this is their time to be in training. So yes, we all made mistakes when we first started in our occupation or our job. So they too are also going to make mistakes. This is normal. It's the way we as parents handle these mistakes is what is so important and critical in our children's lives. So I have a question for you guys. What is the one thing that teenagers want at this time, other than a car? Freedom? What do you guys think? Love? Acceptance? These are all very good answers. The one thing that is at the top of the list that teenagers want is freedom, autonomy. That's exactly what they want at this point right now. They're separating from their parents during this time. They're starting a whole new, different kind of life. And in order to establish their identities, they need to make their own kind of value system to see where they fit in exactly. And there's actually a theorist. His name is Erikson, and he's actually a psychosocial theorist, a personality theorist. And according to Erikson, and if you guys open your folders, there's a little chart that explains it. I'm not going to go in depth with it because it can be a little bit confusing, but I'm just going to touch up on it just very simply. So according to Erikson, individuals progress through 8 psychosocial stages during their lifespan. So this starts from when they're an infant to older elderly age. And each stage is defined by a conflict involving the individual's relationship with their social environments. And the thing is, we must resolve each conflict in order for a healthy development to occur. And the individual is shaped by how each conflict in each stage is resolved. So again, each stage is built around a conflict that involves the individual's relationship with the social environment. The stages themselves are named in 2 opposite basic attitudes. So depending on the conflicts that are resolved. So during this time, if you go to the 5th stage, Erikson said that during the 5th stage of the psychosocial development, it's identity versus role confusion. So this is where adolescents are right now. So they ask themselves these kinds of questions such as, who am I? This becomes very critical question at this stage. Where do I belong? They're trying to understand these things during this time. I know you're probably thinking identity and the ibni, wana al-harabi, and all this stuff, wana al-hamilu al-identity, but I want to ask you guys a question. How many people know of a young man who's getting married or recently got married and still calls, mom over everything? I have an example. Somebody actually just told me this example. It is a very true story. It's nobody from this church, but there was an individual who just got married, and maybe 2 days into the relationship, into the marriage, wife woke up, is making breakfast, and asks, Habibi, how do you want your eggs? And he called his mom to ask, Mama, how do I have my eggs? So it's very, very important for them to, go through the stage very successfully so that they can make their own decisions, and it will impact them later on in life. And it's not just in this kind of a situation, but, in their jobs, in the relationships with friends, all these different kind of relationships. So as adolescents, they need to establish their identity, they need to find their goals and guide their lives. Of course, with the guidance of parents, but we also need to do it in a way that's giving them space to grow, and with us guiding them at the same time without force and too much pressure. And also at this point, adolescents are also seriously looking into their occupation, their future, what they're going to be. This is all part of this stage. And Erikson used the term identity crisis for people who are not able to pass this stage successfully. And that's the disturbance with adolescence in this stage. The next thing I want to talk to you about is actually very interesting: adolescent egocentrism. This is actually when adolescents think they're like movie stars. So, for example, if we were to see a movie star in the street, I don't know who's an Arabic movie star, whoever it is, in the street, what would we do? We would probably watch them. Some of us, we would stare, and some of us might even follow them. Teenagers don't think to that exaggerated sense, but it takes two different kind of forms. The first one is called imaginary audience. So this is, for example, your teenager can have a little dot, a stain, or a pen mark, or something on their shirt. And they go into school and they think everybody's staring at them. Everybody notices the dot. Everybody's looking at me. So they think everybody's watching their every move. They're in the center of attention. The world revolves around them, and that's it. The second one is called personal fable. And this is when the adolescents have an exaggerated sense of their own uniqueness, and they think they're basically indestructible. So to them, nobody's ever felt what they felt. They believe they're protected by misfortune, so nothing bad can happen to them. This includes, unwanted pregnancies or accidents or even drug overdose. It's not going to happen to me. It's them. It can't happen to me. That's basically what they think. So I thought that was a little bit of interesting information that you would like to know about your adolescents. So knowing that they're developing their identities, there are certain disorders that adolescents may experience, or maybe they've already developed from childhood and it's increasing and progressing more. I've listed the disorders. I can touch base on all of them, or if there's one that you have particular interest in, you guys can take a look at the list and tell me, or if you want to speak to me individually afterwards about one, I'd be more than happy to do so. But it is important, if your child does have any of these disorders, don't think that it makes them weak or that, they're not capable. Just like somebody may have diabetes or high cholesterol or something like that, or any other health issue, anyone can experience psychological disorders. And these disorders are caused by a combination of factors. A lot of time, parents don't understand, why is my kid going through this? Where is it coming from? So it's a combination of factors. It includes change in the brain, environmental factors, stress, and also genetics. So if you have any questions about these disorders, feel free to ask, or, it doesn't mean that your child may have this disorder. We all have curiosity, so we can keep that in mind. Yeah, sure. Sure. So briefly, I'll just touch base on every single one of them. Oppositional defiant disorder, this is the first one. For an adolescent to have this disorder, it needs to be occurring for at least 6 months. And the symptoms are, they're very defiant, uncooperative. They could be very nasty towards authority figures to a point where it's hurting their life. Sports, grades, home life, all these different areas are falling apart. Behavior is not just aimed to one person, so it's not just aimed towards mom or just to one teacher. It goes all around, all across. If you suspect that your kid has ODD, oppositional defiant disorder, get help yesterday. It's very, very critical that you get help, because the longer the disturbance course takes, the harder it's going to be to treat. The next one is called conduct disorder. And this is basically when teens have already gone through all the criteria for ODD, and now they're graduating and they're going into conduct disorder. So they've gotten all the requirements and they're moving on to a higher level conduct disorder. Their behavior progresses verbally. It becomes physical, violent, very aggressive at times. They may assault, they may bully, they may even rape, whatever they choose, and they have no regards for anyone. The next one is ADHD. Up to 20% of our kids get diagnosed with ADHD. One of the most popular treatments is a stimulant drug, and it's called a psychostimulant. There are also non-medical treatments, but research shows that a combination of both is the best way to go. So the medical and the different kind of behavioral work that we do with them, or the therapy, both of them works best. So in adolescence, ADHD. Oh, I'm sorry. It stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. So the way it might look like in adolescence is that kids are very inattentive. They might be very disorganized, very overactive, or impulsive. So basically, they could be sitting in a classroom and they're not able to focus. They might not be able to sit still for long. They lose their attention. Some are inattentive. Most are very hyperactive. And that has to be for at least 6 months that they show substantial dysfunction at school, at home, or in social lives. And it has to be 2 of the 3. So at home, at school, or in their social lives. Yes, it's both in males and in females. The next thing is depression. Also consider a teenager's mood. It is going to change. This is the time for them to fluctuate. One day be very upset, one day be very happy. If they're not invited to a certain event, a get-together, to them this is very shattering. To us it might not look like, so what? But to them this means a lot. So it is normal for them to cycle through, some ups and downs. But if the ups and downs become too extreme, and it lasts longer than it normally should, then you should be very concerned. There are 3 forms of moodiness that can become very extreme and actually potentially life-threatening if not treated quickly. And this is depression, it's suicidal thoughts, and bipolar disorders. So depression, what causes depression? Again, very often it's many factors. We have biological, psychological, environmental factors. These are all involved in developing depression, as well as having other psychological disorders. So child might have chemical imbalances in the brain, and actually they can disappear over time with therapy. There's also medication for depression as well. People who have low self-esteem, adolescents who have low self-esteem, view themselves more negatively, very pessimistic about things, and they become very overwhelmed with the stressors that are around them. So for adolescents, what depression looks like is emotional, physical, social, even academic withdrawal. They might eat too much or eat too little. They might sleep too much or even sleep too little. There's going to be lack of interest, lack of energy. And the lack of interest is going to be in things that they once found very pleasurable and enjoying. So that's very, very important. They have feelings of hopelessness. They feel very worthless, and may even find some kind of physical complaints in their body. And they may also have thoughts of death and of dying. And for it to be officially diagnosed clinically as depression, 4 of these things must happen in the course of 2 weeks. The next thing is eating disorders, and this is actually pretty serious. A lot of adolescents, especially girls, have eating disorders. The 2 most established eating disorders are anorexia and bulimia. And there's 3 features that distinguish anorexia. And this is the presence of abnormally low body weight. It's usually 15% below that of expected. And in females, There's amenorrhea, which is basically 3 missed menstrual cycles, and it's consecutive. And the last one is disturbance in the way weight or body shape is experienced, such as, denial of, serious weight loss or abnormally low weight. So how does it begin? Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to be anorexic today. It starts off with a diet, very innocent diet. And this individual starts to lose weight, and they find this new control in their life, that they can handle something, they can control something in their life, and they're effective at it. So they enjoy it and they keep doing it. And research shows that a lot of, especially females, who are in very controlling home environments tend to resort to eating disorders. So like I said earlier, suddenly they find all this power that they have within themselves. They're able to make themselves look the way they want to look, to weigh the way they want to weigh, how much they want to weigh. And he or she does not have to give in to hunger. They control that. 90% of females are vulnerable. Males are increasing these days to be anorexic, and usually the onset is 12. So they begin to, be anorexic around the age of 12 through 18. That's the most, that's the critical time period. But it does occur actually in women in their 40s and their 50s. And research also shows that it's changing, and children even as young as 9 years of age are beginning to become anorexic. The second eating disorder is bulimia. This is actually a very interesting one, and it's characterized by 3 critical criteria, symptoms. The first one is binge eating. Binge eating is basically uncontrolled consumption of food. So they just keep eating and eating and eating large amounts of food, and they can't stop. The second one is the regular resort to the methods designed to influence weight and shape. Basically, this can happen in the form of purging. Purging means, vomiting or laxative abuse. Or it could be strict dieting. It could be fasting. It's not abstaining from food like we did in Lent. So if Lent comes around and, you see your child, abstaining, don't say, Lala, habibi, you're bulimic. No, let them. Also vigorous exercise. You'll see them exercising a lot. And every person, it's a different form for everybody. And the third criteria is self-evaluation that is affected by their body weight. So basically, they evaluate themselves by their weight. So again, it's characterized by eating a large consumption of food in a short time. And the binge is followed by an attempt to get rid of the food. They need to get rid of it, basically to get rid of the calories, and that's what the purge is. So in some cases, the binge, it's a compelling feeling. They want to get rid of anything that's eaten beyond what they determine is okay to eat. I actually have an email that one of my past clients sent to me. I can share that with you. It reads, if I had one bite of bread, just one, I felt as though I blew it. I'd stop listening to whoever was talking to me at this table. I would start thinking, how can I get rid of this? I'd worry about how fat I looked, how I couldn't fit into my clothes. My head would be flooded with thoughts of what to do now. Should I binge? Since I'd already blown it, I had to undo what I've done. The night was blown. I was a mess. So this is a typical thought process that goes on with an individual who's bulimic. Interestingly, some bulimics can go from one restaurant to another, order a full course meal, eat it, and go throw up. Go to another restaurant, order a full course meal, eat it, and throw up, and maybe go through 4 of those before they stop in a night. This is also very costly. Some people, I had one client who would spend $100 to $150 per day just on food. And the binging does occur in secret. So a lot of times, if adolescents have it, you might not know. It may be planned in advance, or it might not be. So you might ask yourself, what's the purpose? Why eat and then throw up? Basically, it can be summed up in that it's a numbing feeling for them to numb their emotional pain. It takes away the pain that they may be feeling. But after the binge, what happens is they panic. They begin to feel some kind of guilt within them, and the binge leaves them very uncomfortable. It's not just physically uncomfortable, but emotionally uncomfortable. And they're filled again with these feelings of shame and guilt, and that's why they resort to the purging, the throwing up, or the laxative use. Some medical complications that you guys should know that are related to bulimia is fatigue, sore throats, ulcerated esophagus, tooth decay, health disturbances because the potassium depletion, and the laxative abuse can lead to constipation, gastrointestinal problems, bleeding, and also psychological dependence on the laxative itself. The next one is anxiety disorders. And again, anxiety is a normal emotion. We as adults, we experience anxiety a lot. Many people feel anxious or nervous when faced with problems at work, problems at home, anywhere in our lives, making important decisions. This is all normal. Anxiety disorders are, however, different. This is when the stress, the intensity, it's too much that it interferes with their ability to function in life. An anxiety disorder is a serious disorder. It should be taken very seriously. People with anxiety disorders, they worry and fear a lot, and it's constant. They have a lot of ruminating thoughts going through their minds. And there's a lot of different anxiety disorders. What I can do is I can name them, and if you have any questions later, you can ask me and I can go in depth about it. The first one is panic disorder, and there's another one called obsessive compulsive disorder. There's post-traumatic stress disorder. This is when trauma has happened in their life. There's social anxiety disorder, specific phobias. Some people fear bugs, some people fear water, some people fear different kinds of things. And there's another one called generalized anxiety disorder. So basically, some symptoms that may be for all of those anxiety disorders, and again, depending on what anxiety disorder you're looking at, each one will have different symptoms, but some general symptoms to look out for are feelings of panic, of fear, uneasiness, uncontrollable, obsessive thoughts, repeated thoughts to flashbacks or traumatic events that might have occurred in their life. Repeated hand washing over and over, or checking of certain things. Is the stove closed or is the door closed? Any kind of nightmares, problems sleeping, cold or sweaty hands, shortness of breath, an inability to stay calm and still, dry mouth, numbing or tingling of hands or in the feet, nausea, muscle tension, and dizziness. So those are just some things to keep in mind. So getting treatment, it's very, very important. If you think that your adolescent may have any of these, it's very, very important to get treatment as soon as possible. And again, it doesn't mean that something is wrong with your child. I don't want you to think that. A lot of time I work with parents who feel like they're ashamed of their kid because they might have some kind of, disorder. Some parents think it can't happen to their kid. It's not possible for their kid to have something like this, and that if they do have it, hatadzi, they can overcome it. And this is completely, completely wrong. Therapy is a means to understanding an individual's feelings, to understand themselves, to work on their communication, conflicts, and insight to what's going on within themselves. And the goal is basically relief of any kind of symptoms they may have, and to help out in changing behavior that might be leading to them, and also for personal growth. I know there's a lot of stigma out there that says, therapy is for crazy people or whatnot. It's not. It's entirely natural for somebody to want to get help when something is too distressful or is too stressful for them. And it's natural for people to seek help or advice or something. Actually, going to see somebody to talk about your problems, it's a personal strength. It's a sign of personal strength and a sign of wisdom. So get the help for your kids that they may need so that they can succeed in life and so that this is not going to impede their development and their growth. The next thing I want to discuss is brain development. And I'm not going to get too much into this because it can get very complicated. But I do want to let you guys know that brain development races in early childhood and then it slows down towards adulthood. But 95% of the brain is developed by age 5. But most of the advanced parts in the brain are not completely developed until adolescence is pretty much over. So basically, it's not too late to make change. So there's different parts of the brain, and researchers took a look at one part of the brain that's called the corpus callosum. And basically, this is a set of nerves that connect to all the parts of the brain that must work together to function so that they can do their job. And basically, this helps out in making good decisions, and it involves, intelligence, consciousness, basic self-awareness. And it was found that this is not fully developed until after adolescence. It was also found that there's another area in the brain called the prefrontal cortex. And it goes through growth spurts that coincide with adolescenthood. So this part of the brain doesn't do its maturation until about age 12 to 20. And this is basically where the more sophisticated of our abilities are. So basically this might involve emotional control, impulses, rational decisions. These are all gifts to us from our prefrontal cortex, gifts that your adolescent has not yet received. So what does this mean to us? There's good news and there's bad news. The good news is it's still possible for changes to occur with your adolescent. It's still possible. Positive changes such as in sports, in music, school achievements, responsibility, social consciousness, all these things can still be worked on and changed in your adolescent. The bad news is it can be used negatively. If the teen years are filled with rage or dysfunction or alienation, these might be set in your brain and the kids' brains for good. So throughout my practice, a lot of parents might come to me and ask me, how can I be a successful parent? What is the thing to do for my kid to be perfectly raised so that they can become good kids? So I want to ask you guys, what's the best thing to be a successful parent? Pray for them, be their friends. Okay. Loving. Unconditionally. Loving, praying, all those are very, very important. But I'm going to share a secret with you guys. And this is just for you guys. There's no such thing as a perfect parent. It does not exist. However, every parent can be successful by doing what he or she knows is right to do. By attending parenting workshops, by reading, by praying, by providing their kid with love, and obtaining spiritual guidance. All these things are very, very important. But all this is accomplished by having a plan. And you'll see throughout the PowerPoint that there's going to be little symbols of keys, which you will see. It's not up there yet, but you'll see them. All this is accomplished by having a plan. A plan is so, so important. I can't emphasize how important it is to have a plan for raising your kids. God's word provides the best way for raising children. So remember to use the Bible. Look through passages, and you'll see that God has a lot of guides for us to raise our children by. If we look at 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 16 and 17, it says, "All Scripture is given by inspiration of God, and it is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness, that the man of God may be perfect, thoroughly furnished unto all good works." So basically, this is telling us that raising godly children is a good work, and the Scripture instructs us in righteousness and equips us for good works. So I want to ask you, what are your goals for your kids? Is it that they have an education, that they have a good job, that they have friends? I also want to ask you, are your goals for your children, are they compliant with what God's goals for them are? They can't do it without God. They can't do it without the Holy Spirit. So keep in mind, you may be setting goals for your kids that aren't part of God's plans. The main goal God has for raising children is to raise them to serve God, so that they can further His kingdom, and so that they can receive eternal life. So that is the main goal God has for you as parents to have for your children. What are your goals for you as mom and dad? What are goals that you have? It's important to understand that parents need to accept the goal of raising their children. They need to accept this, that their children are properly raised, and diligently work towards that goal, and that they can't leave this to others. They can't leave it to, teachers. They can't leave it to, Sunday school only. They can't leave it to just the work of the priest. They need to have a very involved part in their children's life. So I want you to consider God's goals for parents. If we look at Proverbs 22, verse 6, it says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." Our children are not going to always have us around to guide their decisions, to tell them what to do, to tell them right from wrong. They're not always going to have that. So we need to instill it in them so that the understanding of doing right is in them for when we're not around, so that they can also serve God and that they can make their own decisions in this. And there's a vast difference between teaching and training. Training not only involves teaching, but it also becomes a practice that is taught, and it becomes a habit. So it becomes a habit. So that's important to keep in mind. And Proverbs 22, verse 6 says, it doesn't say that children will depart from the way. What it says is they're going to return to it when they're old. So keep that in mind, that they're not going to depart from their way once you provide them with the correct way and properly train them. I've listed a couple of more verses I thought were very, very helpful to guide us when dealing with adolescence. In Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4, it says, "Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in discipline and in the instruction of the Lord." So basically, what does this say? It's saying that you need to bring up your children in the training of the Lord. We can't provoke them as parents. Lots of times, we get heated up in the moment, and you may provoke your children, irritate them, frustrate them. So it's important to also keep that in mind. In Genesis 18, verse 19, it says, "For I know him, that he will command his children and his household after him, that they shall keep the way of the Lord, to do justice and judgment, that the Lord may bring upon Abraham that which he has spoken of him." So Abraham commanded his children to keep the way of the Lord, to do righteous and to do justice. And this should be the goal for all our parents who are truly faithful to God. In Psalms 34, verse 11, It says, "Come, you children, listen to me. I will teach you the fear of the Lord." To accomplish this, we must give children things that money can't buy. So our time, our love, instruction in God's word, our guidance in dealing with different kind of problems, and us being an example. This is also very, very important. In Joshua 24, verse 15, Joshua declared, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." So we need to keep this goal constantly before us. With every decision we make, we should ask, what effect will this have on my child's eternal life? Malachi 2, verse 15, it says, "Has not the Lord made them one? In flesh and spirit they are his. And why one? Because he was seeking godly offspring. So guard yourself in your spirit and do not break faith with your wife of your youth." So what does God seek when he joins man and woman together? He seeks godly offspring. In Genesis 18, verse 19, it says, "For I have chosen him so that he will direct his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just, so that the Lord will bring about for Abraham what he has promised." So again, God approved of Abraham because he brought his children up in the right way, and Abraham did not leave it up to the school system or to anybody else to raise his children. He had a direct influence, a big part in his children's upbringing. Also, another one I thought that I'd like to share is 1 Samuel chapter 3, verses 12 to 14. "In that day I will perform against Eli all things which I have spoken concerning his house. When I begin, I will also make an end. For I have told him that I will judge his house forever for the iniquity which he knows, because his sons made themselves vile, and he restrained them not. And therefore I have sworn unto the house of Eli that the iniquity of Eli's house shall not be purged with sacrifice nor offering forever." So when Eli's sons became corrupt, God held Eli accountable, right? God rebuked Eli. He didn't rebuke the school system. He didn't rebuke, peer pressure, friends. He didn't rebuke them. Because Eli did not instill discipline into his children, he too will also be held accountable. So just wanted to keep that in mind as well. Also, we need to understand our children are not given to us to do what we please. They're technically not really our property. They're God's children, and they're given to us as gifts to raise them according to his will and what he wants and for his purpose. So basically, we've covered, talking about the goals that you should have for your teens, the goals that you should have for yourselves, raising the teens, and the key thing is to have a plan. Now I want to discuss an issue that most families have to deal with. I'm assuming a lot of the parents here were not born and raised in America. A lot of them maybe born in Egypt or another country. But even for parents who may have been born here, times have changed a lot. Growing up in America back then, it's not the same as growing up now in America. It's very, very different. I personally was born and raised here in America, and times are completely different. The things adolescents have to deal with right now, in my time, we didn't have to deal with those kinds of things. So basically my point is, life is very hectic for teenagers. They go through a lot. They experience a lot. They see a lot in schools. They have a lot of stressors, whether it be in school, extracurricular activities, among their social group, at home. There's a lot going on with them, and a lot that they're learning about themselves, and a lot that they're learning about others. So the generation gap is basically the distance between each generation in values, in behaviors, in understandings, and it's marked by a lot of confusion and a lack of understanding among each person in the different generation years. And a lot of times, it's very difficult, having, somebody come and immigrate from another country and then raise children here, it's very difficult to, be able to see what your kid is going through, and also to see, for your kid to see what you're thinking and, your thinking process about living here in America. So, for example, you might set a curfew for your child for, 10 a.m. or 10 p.m. And you could see this as a management issue or safety issue for your children. For your teen, they can perceive that as, you're just trying to control me, you're trying to run my life, or you're trying to dominate it. So it's important to be aware of how we may perceive a certain situation differently depending on, where we're coming from. So your kids might see something very different than how you perceive it. So it's just important to be aware of these kinds of things. There is a process, it's called assimilation, and this is basically when a minority group gradually adapts to customs and to attitudes of a different culture. So a lot of us come, from Egypt to America and are faced with, again, a lot of different, value differences, morals. But research shows that people who are able to take a little bit from their old culture and to take a little bit from the new one that they're in are actually the most healthiest psychologically and have the best outcomes. And also keep in mind, there is a lot of good things that we can take from the American culture. For instance, there's rules. Take a look at traffic signs. We actually use, our traffic signs and, stop signs do exist here. There are many excellent resources that your children can also use. They can be ambitious, they can dream, they can pursue different kinds of goals, professions that they want. But at the same time, we need to keep our strong faith, our values, our morals. And of course, we can't forget our mahshi and all the good food that we have. What is your teen thinking? What's going on inside that brain of theirs? I've listed my top 5 list of most popular teen complaints about parents. Don't take it personally, but this is actually their top complaints. And as you read them, think about how it applies to you and your situation. And keep in mind that your child may say something, but there's a hidden message behind what they may be saying. So they can say something, but really mean something else. And these are things that we're going to work on today to be able to pick up on little messages that they say that you think mean something else completely, but it doesn't. So the first one is, if my parents would just leave me alone, everything would be fine. Almost all teenagers want independence. They want to be left alone. But then also it becomes a problem for us. Sometimes they want to be left alone, but then when you leave them alone, what do they say? My parents don't care about me. So it's a lose-lose situation for us. The second one is, my parents are so out of touch. It would surprise many teenagers to know that you understand what they're going through. You can feel their experiences or understand their pressures that they're experiencing, but teenagers barely believe that parents understand what they're going through. Usually, the angrier teenagers are, usually the angrier they are, the more they feel like you don't understand them. So there's built-in frustration that's going on there. And usually this frustration, this anger, it's due to their lack of ability to communicate with you. They can't get things across to you, messages, their feelings, whatever is bothering them. So they bottle it in, and it becomes anger. They may even insist, you know what, my friend's parents don't treat them like this. They aren't like that. They let them stay out late. This is called the so-called cool parents. Oftentimes, these parents are made up, or it's exaggerated to kind of manipulate you into giving in or to get whatever they need. The third thing, the third complaint from adolescents is, my parents are control freaks. So be aware of excessive control. Sometimes we have really good intentions, we really do, but we suffocate them too much. We become too controlling. So be honest with yourself and see, are you setting up realistic expectations? Are you being too harsh? Are you being too controlling? Are you impeding their ability to grow and develop? And remember, are they developing that sense of identity that we talked about earlier? The fourth one is, all my parents care about is, and you can fill that in on your own. Every family is going to have a different answer to that. Teenagers often attack their parents' values because they feel frustrated. They feel very frustrated. They feel hurt. They feel like they're unable to please their parents. Many believe they're not good enough. They may get a B+ on an exam, and parents might say, why B+? I want an A. Okay, ماشي خلاص. They get the A. Where's my A+? They get the A+. You have another bad grade in another class. Why couldn't you get A+ everywhere else in all your other classes? And this greatly, greatly affects kids. Two things happen. The first one option is they abandon their efforts and don't try. Well, khalas, either way, I'm not going to be good enough. I'm not going to be able to, please them. So why try? The second one is they try too hard and they become perfectionistic, which is not good at all, because this also sets them up for failure. They're always going to try to exceed their limits, always try to accomplish something even higher. They might accomplish that and go on to the next level. And basically this leads to a lot of disappointment in themselves, because they're always going to feel like they could have done better or they could have done something more. So be aware of these kinds of frustrations and respond appropriately as a parent. And I have a list of signs that teenagers are feeling frustrated and hurt, and you'll also find that in your packet. And I'm just going to go through them very quickly because you do have them in your packet for the sake of time. The first one is he or she continually tells you that it doesn't matter when you let her down or him down. He overreacts to very neutral kind of comments. They go out of their way to avoid you. They tell you about their parents, their friends' parents at school who are very cool. They abandon any kind of effort to gain your approval, and they insist that everything is fine when their appearance and actions suggest otherwise. So be careful for these signs, look for them, and make sure they're handled properly. The fifth one is they don't even know me. So now I want to give you guys a pop quiz. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about your kids to see how much you really know about them. How many of you guys know who your kid's favorite role model is? Who's their 5 closest friends? Do you know their names? Do you know who they are? What are their favorite TV shows? What are their hobbies? What do you think your kid wishes that you personally can do for him or her? And how does your kid want you to treat him or her, or to communicate with them? These are all very, very important questions. So a lot of times we feel like we know our child, we know them, we live with them, we've raised them. But a lot of times we really, really don't know who they are as a person. So this is when teens feel very misunderstood. They feel like they're being, rejected, or they can't communicate with you or be open with you or come to you with different kind of problems or situations. So again, we have to be able to handle this in the right way, and the first step is getting to know them. Getting to know them as you would get to know, somebody you've met for the first time. Different kinds of, interests, hobbies, to get to know how they think, what they like, what they don't like, how they like to be treated. All these things are very, very important. And you're not going to be able to relate to them or understand them if you don't take the time to get to know these things. The next thing that I want to talk about is self-esteem. And this is actually a very, very important area. How many times do you tell your child that you're proud of them? Think back to the last time that you told them that you're proud of them. There's a drop in self-esteem starting in age 12. It's important to remember that teens respond better to encouragement than to criticism. So catch your teenager, catch them doing something good. Acknowledge them for doing something good instead of always putting them down. Your contribution to self-esteem is very, very important. Parents play a significant role. Parents play a very significant role in their kids' self-esteem. So I want you to use praise very liberally. Sometimes parents and teens are so busy in their daily lives that they forget to compliment one another. Do you interact with your child more with criticism, or is most of your communication telling them what they've done wrong? So never underestimate the power of a compliment. We as adults, we love to hear compliments. So imagine how much your teenager would love to hear them. And sincere praise is actually one of the building blocks of self-esteem. So your assignment when you go home is to catch them doing something good. If you're a person who instinctively always tries to find fault in every single thing, find something worthy and praiseful in your child, in their behavior, in their personality, whatever it is, and tell them about it. Praise them. And also something else that I want to talk about is to set achievable goals for your children. Give them situations that they can handle, and then praise them step by step. I was actually in a meeting with a mother a few weeks ago, and she kept telling me that her kid is very capable. He can do things, but he chooses not to. So I gave her a suggestion. Her main complaint was she's got 5 or 6 kids, so she has a lot to handle, and she works full time, so it gets very busy for her. So she wants her older son to help out with his younger brothers and sisters' homework. So she tells him, spend an hour with this kid, with one brother, and spend another hour with your other sister for homework every single night. So when he doesn't do it, she begins to start yelling at him, and you can't do it. All I ask is for this, and you can't even accomplish this small little thing. So we tried something new. We tried, instead of saying an hour, let's do something 15 minutes. Something very small, something that they can accomplish. And she tried it. He did it for 15 minutes, and she used praise. That's wonderful. Thank you. You're a great help. You helped them understand this very, very well. What happened? The kid actually stayed for 45 minutes that time. The next day, he stayed for the full hour. And he didn't just do it like for fun. He did it because he wanted to. And he felt like, he can do something. So don't ever underestimate the power of praise. And also something else is ask for their opinions. Even if you don't want to hear it, ask for their opinions. Seek your children's opinions every now and then. It doesn't have to be a daily thing. But this lets them feel like they're helpful, that you can respect them, and that you're open to their thoughts, and they mean something to you. Since teenagers are convinced that they know everything anyway, why not ask them? You're only going to make them happy and encourage them. And This also initiates discussion. This is something, an open door for you to get in and begin to talk to them about it, and comments that they may know more than you about certain things. So look for areas where they excel, whether this be in a certain subject, whether this be in a sport, whether this be in, computers, whatever it is. Look for where they excel, ask for their opinions, ask them a question. They want to feel like you care about them and you care about what they care about. So they want to feel that you care about them and you're interested and that you care about their interests as well. And when they see that you're genuinely convinced that you really, really are interested in what they think, they're going to be more likely to share their thoughts with you, to be open with you. And then they're going to be open to asking you for your own opinion. And not to mention, this is going to raise their self-esteem. So this is a win-win situation. And again, this opens up a door for you to get in, be able to have this good bond relationship with them, and then they can look to you for advice and ask for your opinion rather than them seeing it as, they're controlling or they're forcing their thoughts or opinions on me. The next thing is adolescent suicide. And I bring this up not to depress you, but to make you aware that this is very serious. Suicidal ideation is thinking about suicide, committing suicide. It's very, very, very common in adolescence. Suicide is actually the third highest cause of death among teenagers. Actually, the age range is between 15 and 24. That's the highest risk. Suicide rates have doubled for children 5 years of age to 14 in this past generation. You may think, no, not my son, not my daughter, this can't happen to me. But one thing can lead to the other and can lead to the other. Parasuicide is an attempt that does not result in death. So this basically can be like a knife mark on the wrist, or swallowing an entire bottle of sleeping pills, overdosing, and it's very, very common in adolescence between ages of 6 and 20. I thought of an interesting fact. Every day we lose 14 adolescents and young children to suicide. 14. A few months ago, there was a lot on the news, children who hung themselves, or parents came home and found them overdosed on sleeping pills or medication. So this is increasing. Our children may not know how to resolve problems. They become too frustrated or too angry. So this is a means for them to get relief or to basically resolve their problems. Quick question for you guys. Do you guys think that in order to commit suicide, does that mean that the individual is depressed? So you might sit here and be like, well, my child is not depressed. Does that mean an individual doesn't necessarily have to be depressed to commit suicide? What do you guys think? Do you have to be depressed? How many people say no? How many people say yes? Okay. The answer is actually no. You do not have to be officially diagnosed with depression for you to consider suicide as an option. Many suicides do occur in conjunction with depression, but many do not. Many adolescent suicides occur out of anger towards authority. They might see it as a payback or something. Actually, one of my first clients that I ever saw about 5 years ago was very, very upset about something. Somebody said something to them right before going into a therapy session with me. And she was very, very angry. She left the office and she went into this kitchen area and she took out a knife and she put it to her throat. So I knew at this point she was either going to kill herself or I was going to change majors, because I didn't know what was going to happen. So this is a perfect example of how people who may not be able to handle their emotions or frustrations, they can just think in their head, let me just go get a knife and, kill myself. And if somebody's not there to intervene or help them through this, they can, accomplish the suicide. Some suicides occur impulsively, following small rejections or any kind of losses that they may have. Some might be to twisted romantic adventures, or some might be copycats that mimic suicides that their peers in the community may have done. So there's a couple of signs that you can tell if you think that. You have a question? Mm-hmm. 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 You're talking about the death, the lyrics? Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, absolutely. So, and I'll definitely touch up on that. Got a little bit ahead of us, but that's a very good question. Um, Signs that your child may be experiencing suicidal thoughts or even planning one is the use of drugs, especially alcohol. Giving away prized possessions. A lot of time they like to give away things, their possessions, especially things that are very dear to them. Sudden contacts with friends. These are basically them contacting past friends or friends that are very, very dear to them. And this is basically, again, them saying goodbye. Or also talking, writing, listening to music with death themes. So just because your child might listen to some music that might talk about death or whatever, it doesn't mean that, oh my God, they're going to plan a suicide, I need to intervene. You really have to look into it and see, are all of these signs there? So I don't know if I answered your question or not. Affect them? Mm-hmm. I see. Mm-hmm. 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 Okay. Sure. So the question was, if an individual is listening to certain kind of music that has death themes, but they don't necessarily have any of the other symptoms for suicide or for depression or whatnot, can this affect them? And the answer is, if an individual is emotionally healthy and they're just listening to these kinds of music, chances are just listening to these words are not going to have them resort to suicide. There has to be a lot of other stuff going on with them. How do they deal with stress? Individuals who are more healthier emotionally are going to resort to other kinds of means as opposed to suicide. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Especially with rap music and even now, even R&B music or whatever, lyrics now are all these things
Media, and I will be getting into that actually very soon. Media, television, movies, they have a huge, huge impact on our teenagers. But to be more direct with answering your question, if a child is constantly hearing lyrics of "I'm going to kill myself," are they going to turn to that means of resolving their problems? If it's instilled in them from the beginning and they know how to resolve their problems in a healthier way, it's already instilled in them from childhood, from whatever. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they will resort to suicide. However, if they are in this identity crisis, or if they are going through something at the time and they're unsure, or there's stressful events that they're unable to handle, they can get weak and they can have suicidal thoughts. So it's definitely not a no way. So for each individual, it's very different depending on where that person is. So if you are seeing these behaviors, make sure you get help now, immediately. The next thing is a very big parental concern, and it's the internet. It's only normal now to see teens always on the internet, or via their computer or their telephone. I mean, when is a teenager not using the internet or not using their phone? Internet can be very useful, don't get me wrong. It can be very useful if it's used in the right way. So if you're having problems with your teenager using the internet, make sure that you do have parental restrictions on them, if that's a concern for you. Some risks that are involved in using the internet too much is lack of sleep, profound loss of sleep for students. And this affects them because they go to school and they can't stay awake in class. They can't focus because they're up all night chatting or on different kinds of websites. But also, for teens, it can become a more dangerous kind of peer influence. The internet has been linked to depression, isolation, and even suicide risk. Teens are creating these cyber relationships to really supplant real-time relationships. So if you're concerned, what is your child doing on the internet all night long? Who are they talking to? What's going on? Every time you walk into the room, do they close the browser? You need to observe these things and see. If this is the case, I want to ask you, where is the computer in the house? Is it in their bedroom? Is it out in an open place? If you are having these kinds of issues, consider moving the computer somewhere else where you don't have to sit there behind them or sit next to them watching what they do, but it is open, in an open place. The next thing that I want to talk about very briefly. Yeah. And I like how you said that, you sat down with her and you told her and you gave her examples of how you trust her. And that's very important because, just like you said, a lot of teens will take the defense side and say, well, you don't trust me, you're trying to control me, and I'm not doing anything wrong. So it's very, very important for you to communicate with them and tell them, you know what, I do trust you. Let them know that you do trust them. Give them examples just like you did. That's wonderful. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So the question was, can we tell them from the beginning that the computer can't be in their room or whatnot? That's actually something I will be going into a little bit later. Rule setting. Having rules and expectations to follow the rules and consequences are very, very important. So you can be upfront with your child and tell them, you know what, I trust you, and I'm giving you this amount of time on the internet here, or you can do this, and let them know from the beginning. But you must be consistent with this. So if one time you let them take it to their room, or one time you let them, in the living room, and you're not very consistent with your rule setting, this can be very confusing to them, and this can, give out mixed signals and messages. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a very good question. So every family is going to have different kind of rule setting, depending on, together, building rules together and having them play a very big role in it. You sit and you decide these kinds of rules together. And you're right, it is very hard. It's very hard to tell an 18 or 19-year-old, sorry, you can't have a computer in your room. I'm not saying not to give them a computer in their room. It's a very fine line. It's very tricky. These are all things that each family needs to sit within themselves and see, do I have parental restrictions? What am I worried about? Am I talking to them about the concerns that I'm worried about? Is it that they're on Facebook all night long? Can I give them, this is your time block for Facebook, or this is your time block to, and it's not just the internet. This is the time that you have for the telephone to talk to your friends. Setting certain kinds of rules, restrictions that they understand and that they have a say in, involving them is very, very important. And I'm going to go into that very, very soon, because when you involve them in the decision making, when you involve them in the rule setting, they're going to be more likely to follow those rules because they helped out in the decision making. So involve them as much as possible. They may complain, I don't think that's fair and that's wrong and you don't trust me. Talk to them. What about it makes you think I don't trust you? Find out where this is coming from, the feelings behind it, and go from there. And as a family, you decide, what the best option for you is and for your kids.
Different. And I wanted to link specifically with the internet and what they're doing and all that stuff with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Mhm. 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 Yeah, absolutely. That's a very good point. It is very important for us to be honest with ourselves and to be honest with our kids. Sharing with our kids to a certain degree, of course, is very good. Using I statements, or sharing stories that, if your child, for example, comes home one day and is very upset at school, or you might know what it's about, but they might not want to talk about it. Maybe some girls were making fun of her, boys were picking on him today or something, or whatever it is. You can share and say something like, I remember when I was your age, that hurt me a lot when, I didn't fit into a certain crowd, and, that'll open up a door for them to say or think, oh, mom or dad, they experience this. They understand what I go through. And at that point, they might want to open up. They might not want to. But they'll have it in your head, these little messages of, validating their feelings, letting them know, I understand what you're going through, or I care, or help me understand what you're going through. They'll remember these things. Maybe they won't open up or share the first time, or the second time, or the third. But if you stay with it and are consistent, eventually they will. The next thing that I want to touch on very, very briefly is pornography. A lot of boys especially go online and watch porn, videos, watch it on TV, or even in magazines, or even, in virtual reality games, they have them. Boys ages 12 to 17 are among the biggest consumers of pornography, 12 to 17. And there's mountains of research, so much research that's been established that males are they're more visually oriented and more naturally drawn to images. And basically what this is it takes one image for them. You don't even need to go to a porn site. You can go on to any website and they just pop up anywhere. So it takes one single image for them to be like, I want to see more, or, their curiosity. So keep that in mind, because it also teaches them a lot about sex and about women. And it will teach them to objectify women, that women are just, toys who just exist for, gratification. But even more than that, it takes them away from God. They feel so much shame and feel so much guilt after watching the porn that they avoid prayer, that they avoid turning to God. They feel, how can I pray to God after what I've done? So this is also very, very important to keep in mind. And I can't express to you the amount of teenage boys who are struggling with this very, very much. They want to stop, but they don't know how to. So keep this in mind. So some parents might feel like it's okay to keep, the computer in my kid's bedroom or whatnot. So keep these things in mind, that I'm not saying it is happening, but I'm saying that it may, or it's a possibility. So keep those things in mind with your kids. Yes, it does happen with girls as well, very much so. The focus is more on boys in the research. Boys are more likely to do it more than females, but females are definitely, thank you for bringing that up, are definitely are likely to watch it as well and participate in that activity. So how are we with time? Do you guys need a 10-minute break, or should I keep going a little bit more? Take a break. Okay, why don't we take a 10-minute break, and then we can discuss peer pressure. Yes, there's coffee, there's donuts downstairs, so please help yourself. So what time is it now, so we can set it? It's 11, so 11:10 we'll meet back here. Great.